Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Burke. I am the Executive Director of Western Liberty Network. We have training sessions like this every week, every Saturday at 1 o'clock. And as always, you can get into the session by going to the westernlibertynetwork.org website and click on the red button that shows you how to enter the Zoom meeting. There's a lot of other information that I'll talk about shortly. For those of you who may be new, Western Liberty Network is an organization consisting of myself, a board of directors, an advisory committee, and numerous volunteer trainers. WLN's purpose is to help activists reweave the fabric of our political culture by empowering them to take control of their own governance. We do this by building a political farm team of local elected office holders, citizen advocates, and campaign volunteers. We train activists who use their training for the campaigns and causes they care about. We support limited government principles generally, but our training is available to all. If you would like to support Western Liberty Network, just go to the www.westernlibertynetwork.org website and then go to the support tab. All contributions to Western Liberty Network are fully tax deductible. Disclaimer we have to do every week. Western Liberty Network is a 501c3 educational organization. As such, WLN does not endorse or oppose any political party, candidate, even the ones we train, ballot measure, or legislation. The statements and other forms of information provided by WLN's guest presenters and participants are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Western Liberty Network. There's one thing that I want to show. I'm going to share my screen quickly. Let's see. Waiting for the screen to come up where I can select a screen to share. There we go. Here. Okay, I have a screen up right now. And as you can see, the top story is that of today's Zoom session featuring Michelle BINKER. But if you scroll down, you'll see that it is now time for people to file for local nonpartisan office. Western Liberty Network encourages all activists to run for local nonpartisan office. There are over 3,500 such positions available in Oregon, and this includes things like water boards, park boards, vector control boards, positions at every level that people can run for. And probably another, based on the survey I've done so far, 4,000 such positions in Washington state. If you are interested in running for any of these positions, or you know anyone who's interested in running for these positions, contact your county elections office. Here, if you click on the flag of Oregon, it'll bring you to a site on the Secretary of State's website, which lists all the counties. And if you click on Lynn County, for example, it'll show you how to contact the Lynn County election office. In that way, you can find out all of the positions that you're eligible to run for, and you can choose one. They're usually very affordable to run for. The filing fees are low. The voter pamphlet fees are low. It doesn't cost a lot of money to run for these positions. And this is how we can build a limited government farm team by reweaving the fabric of our political culture, by taking responsibility for our own governance. So I encourage everyone to check that out. We'll be providing candidate training to those who do file, and to those who win, we'll be providing training after the May 18th election on how to govern with limited government principles in local office. The deadline to register in Oregon is March 18th. In Washington, there's a filing period from May 17th to the 21st. And so we'll keep folks up to date on that. And again, if you go on and click the support tab, you can always support Western Liberty Network. So Janice Dysinger just joined us. We've got a pretty good group here now. So I'm going to continue by talking a little bit about conference etiquette. I'm going to mute everyone shortly. However, if you want to talk or ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself. But when you're done speaking, please remute yourself. In this way, we can improve the quality, the audio quality of this session and minimize things like feedback. So at this point, I'd like to turn over the floor to Michelle Binker. I've known Michelle Binker for a number of years now. She is brilliantly intelligent, extremely skilled. She was the senior legislative aide for former State Representative Carl Wilson when he was the Republican minority leader, and also for Wally Hicks. Michelle has been a publication editor and has run for the legislature herself on both the Republican and Libertarian tickets. She understands all the ins and outs of being a legislative aide and can help you understand how to work with them so as to maximize the quality of your experience as a citizen lobbyist. So with that, I will mute everyone and I will unmute Michelle and I will turn over the microphone to Michelle. Go ahead.
Super. Thank you, Richard, and thank you everyone for being here. As he said, my name is Michelle Binker, and I was a legislative assistant for 7 years. Prior to that, I was a news media professional in Josephine County, which I found to be an extraordinarily good training ground for what I was obliged to do when I got to legislature, which predominantly is about collecting information and synthesizing it and then regurgitating it in a way that is readily apprehendable to my member or to the members of the public or to the media, the folks that I'm interacting with generally. I was directly hired by my legislators, and I worked in session and out of session, both in Salem and in district. Many of the people that I met while I was up there, we came from various backgrounds. There are a number of folks who live and work in Salem, and they are professional full-time legislative staff. They don't necessarily live in the district represented by the member, and they have the opportunity to move around, and they have served several consecutive offices for different districts across the state. Others begin as interns. We get a number of interns from Willamette University across the street from the Capitol, and quite a few people who start out as interns move on to become legislative staffers or members themselves later. Some folks arrive at the job as members of the campaign staff. They might have been the best darn door knocker that person had when they were seeking office, or they were good at coming up with policy or media briefs or something like that, and that carried over into their work at legislature. Some of them also hire, some of those members also hire their spouses or children to work for them, and that's kind of a mixed bag, I say, but you know, some had incredible longevity there, and other times they found that they couldn't work with their kids more than a single session before they went ahead and hired somebody else to do the job. And so far as training goes, we don't get a lot of training about how to do the job specifically. We get data systems training and how to work with the Oregon Legislative Information System. We get some public records training that informs us about how to retain and store and organize our public records and why that's important. And in recent years, we have received hours of sexual harassment and equitable workplace training, which probably became necessary because that's a really tense and emotionally charged place to work. And there had been issues in the recent past with members and other positions who were in power, exploiting that power and taking advantage of people who were in the workplace. So there was, at the beginning of every session, we would undergo hours of training with regards to that. In the chat box, I have muted myself accidentally, sorry there. In the chat box, I have included a link to a job description. It's a 3-page job description. It's for Senator Kathleen Taylor's office, but it's very typical of the work that we do when we're in session and out of session. So I myself was Chief of Staff, which is a super fancy title, but it's not an official one insofar as your job description goes. But when I had staff, I was the chief, and I was involved in hiring, training, and supervising all of those folks. And no, sorry, I just got an interruption. And that was significant because you wanted to get the right people in there to help you out. And if you had a problem employee, it really made things difficult overall. Predominantly what I was involved with was interacting with the other members, staff, media, agencies, agency heads, and the public, which meant that I was obliged to, and you want to hire people who have good communication skills, who can write effectively, who can engage with people on the phone or in person. And I also was oftentimes my members' representative on task forces or in front of the public back home when we would put together a town hall or something like that. In front of the media, I was the person who got to answer for my member and speak on behalf of my member and make a number of decisions based on what I knew that his policy preferences were. So I was that representative for my representative. And some of the things that you're not going to find in an official job description would be tasks like being the concierge and making travel arrangements, or sometimes the chauffeur driving someone to or from a committee hearing or meeting or something like that, and ensuring that they got there on time and that they had the time to take care of their issues while they were there. Can you excuse me for one moment, please? I have to answer a question. Okay, thank you. Also, within the office, I was kind of a wardrobe specialist or valet. I would provide a mirror, for instance, and a lint roller just to make sure that my member was looking good when he stepped out onto the floor. Just kind of give him that once over and send him on his way. Also, snacks and beverages kept the office chock full so that they weren't getting the low blood sugar and becoming hangry as the day wore on. Like I said, it's an emotionally charged and busy place, and they don't always have time to stop and eat a good meal. So the bulk of what we're here to talk about today is how you as members of the public and citizen-led lobbyists can effectively interact with your legislative assistants. So I just want to say, first and foremost, be really prepared and be an expert in the thing that you are coming to talk about. Have a one-page document available that you can leave in the office that very succinctly outlines what the issue is that you're there to talk about, whether you are pro or against a piece of legislation. Spell that out, give us the number of the bill, and be ready with a stack of those to leave at every office, because you're not necessarily going to find, they're not necessarily going to have time to give you that face-to-face 15 or 20 minutes to talk. Respect the time and the space of the legislative assistant and staff. This is where they're working. It's often 12 hours a day. So please don't cram 15 or 20 people into the office and then stand around and chat for 20 minutes waiting for your appointment, because they've got other things that they need to attend to. And unless you are, from home and you're known and it's arranged ahead of time that hanging out in the office is a-okay, I would recommend that you find somewhere else to group up and wait for your appointments to take place, because it can be very distracting, not only to the staffer for the member that you're there to visit, but for the staffers on either side, because we work in, or did work in, a very large open office situation. Yeah, find it's most helpful if you find a speaker to your particular issues who is from the legislator's home district. That really makes an impact when someone from home can say directly to the member, this is how this is going to affect us or affect my family or affect my business. That really rings all the right bells and is the most impactful way to get your message across. And I loved to see people from, I'm in Josephine County, and I love to see people who came all the way up to Salem to spend the day talking about their issues, even if they weren't pro-Republican or against the thing that we were against. It was always nice to see someone from Grants Pass or the Illinois Valley and welcome them to their representative's office. So try to find that person who is from that member's district if you can, from within your group, to speak to your issues. And if you're communicating via email or by phone, make sure to include your address and town so we can tell what part of the state you're from, and your phone number if you want someone to follow up with you. These days, all of the meetings that are taking place with constituents and lobbyists and others are taking place virtually via Zoom. So if you have a Zoom meeting set up or scheduled, make sure that you've got your audio up ahead of time, that you're punctual, and that you have one or two speakers, that you're not going to overwhelm them with, like a dozen people at a time on a Zoom meeting who all want to get their point of view across. That can be problematic. Fortunately for me, that isn't something that I've had to deal with because I left legislature in mid-January, and I'm working full-time here in Josephine County. So it's an extraordinary session that they're undergoing right now. The folks that I know from who are still working there are telling me things are bad, that it is chaos, that it's the worst that they've ever seen. And some have even said, Oregon is finished, get out now. The reason you're here today is because you don't believe Oregon is finished, that you want to do something about it. And I applaud you for that and for hanging in there. I plan to hang in here. Some of the things you don't want to do, form letters, for instance. We can tell when an action alert has gone out and the moms who demand gun control action, or someone has gotten the alert and they are all sending a dozen, 2 dozen, 6 dozen form letters to all of their members. We can tell. And often after the first 1 or 2, those get put into a file folder. And unless you are from our district, for instance, I'm just going to report to my member that you got 120 letters on this topic today, but I'm not going to read it to them, and I'm not, except for the gist of the thing. And they get ignored after a while. So try to be more personable and personal when you are attempting to get your point across, and personalize those action alert letters to the best of your ability, because they become more of a nuisance than anything that's really worth paying a whole lot of attention to after the first 1 or 2. Don't yell at your legislative assistants or staffers. Frankly, we can hang up on you. We're not paid to take that kind of abuse. We want to hear you, and we want to be sure to get your salient points written down and memorialized so I can share that with my member, but I'm not there to take abuse, and that just wrecks my day. So please don't yell at the staff on the phone or in person if you can at all avoid it. I understand that most of these issues that people are making an effort to come to Salem for are highly charged and may impact our way of life going forward. And we absolutely don't want to see that thing happen. But getting belligerent in person is not going to win you any points for you or your cause. So please try to keep it as calm as possible. And another don't, like I said earlier, is please don't hang around the office chatting while you're waiting for your appointment or a specific committee meeting, because it's distracting to everyone in the immediate vicinity and to the staff. And if you plan to spend the day in the building, coordinate with your group and try to figure out where you're going ahead of time and make it, if you can, so that you are not walking miles a day, but just be prepared to walk, because it's a largish building and the offices are spread out all over the place. And if you can coordinate with your group to do, like, you all do this on the House side and you guys do it on the Senate side, you're going to find you're having a much more enjoyable day than otherwise. Plan a place to go to lunch or pack a picnic. Sometimes the weather is nice and you can eat nearby, but lunch places are full when they're open. I'm hoping that things are going to be open and accommodating for us very soon. And understand that parking is nightmarish, and that you might want to find parking at some distance from the building and then coordinate driving yourselves in a group, because everybody, the staff included, have to find a place to park. We're all responsible for our own parking. We don't get the parking garage necessarily. So parking is full right around the Capitol and Willamette University. I wanted to share with you an example of some really successful citizen advocacy. And to this day, I remember this woman's name. Her name was Jennifer. And her issue was adrenal insufficiency syndrome. Specifically, she wanted to ensure that doctors and school-based healthcare centers had specific training on identifying and treating adrenal insufficiency syndrome. It was important to her and to her children. She was the requester of a bill that was sponsored by Senator Przanski, and she was the lone advocate out there lobbying for this bill. And she gave up hours and hours of her own time to come into the building and meet with every single representative and senator to talk about adrenal insufficiency syndrome. She was direct, she was brief, she always had a small card or one pager to drop off with us. One time she even brought cupcakes, but she was relentless, and she got her bill passed by unanimously in both chambers. And she was so effective. I remember her name to this day and her issue. She was also just exceedingly polite and very successful in ensuring that we all knew what the issue was and that everyone was going to vote for it. So she was there maybe twice a month in person. Like I said, she dropped off postcard-sized notes or one-pagers about the bill. She made the pitch personal. She explained exactly how this was going to affect her family and how they had been affected without this sort of specialized training. And she brought us cupcakes once, and that was memorable also. So I really, I really look up to her and hold her up as an example of how to be an effective citizen legislator. I'm super pleased that Don Phillips has decided to join us today online. When I went to the legislature in 2014, I was welcomed to the office by my member. And then he said, let's go down the hall and meet Dawn. And Dawn was working for Representative Dennis Richardson at that time. And my member told me that if I had any questions whatsoever, that I was going to talk to Dawn. And she was probably provided the best training ongoing for the several years that we worked together up there that I could have asked for. So I'm glad to see you here, Dawn.
Oh, it's great to see you too, Michelle. Yeah, Michelle's great. It's like, I think at the time I probably worked 13 or 14 years at the Capitol. I lasted for a total of 17 years there and 18 members. And I'm not sure if they trained me or I trained them at one point. Yes. So it was a great ride, and I have great memories there. And I think Michelle hit a lot of nails on a lot of heads in her conversation with you guys today. I can add a couple things that I think might be helpful. And I think one of them is from a perspective of if you're an advocate for a particular bill that you want, that's your issue, that's your particular idea, whether you're a group or just a particular individual, come prepared. Don't just come in and say, you know, there ought to be a law. You know, like I'm going to City Hall and I want this to change. Come with your homework done with, you know, what needs to change in state law, you know what statute it is, you know, I mean, most members need to see, most, I say, I'm not even going to talk about the Democrats in charge right now, but most members want to see a problem and a solution, and how do we get there? So they want to know, well, what's the problem you're trying to fix and how bad is it? And they want to know that you have support from other groups, whether it's the gal that Michelle was talking about in her particular medical issue, or whether it's affordable housing, or whether it's, you know, the pandemic that's going on now. Well, how can we go back now and help the seniors in those, you know, nursing homes and avoid the problems we had in the past, get better ventilation for them, or make sure their staff is better trained for testing or for handing out vaccines. You know, go back and look at what problem are we trying to fix, and get support from various groups, from the nursing union that hands out those vaccines, or from senior services advocates, and go around and get support from those various groups and bring those letters of support, emails of support, or whatever you can do with you. Come equipped, because there's always strength in numbers. And, you know, show them the statute that needs to be fixed. Show them what you think the fix is for that bill. I mean, legislative staffers like Michelle and I probably can help walk you through that and say, well, let's take a look at what the statute says now and how we think it could be fixed. But it helps if you already have that homework done and you think what needs to be fixed in the law. Like, well, let's see if we could get better training for some of these people, or we need better punishment for people who are not helping in this way. Do we need to increase penalties or something like that? So come equipped, come prepared, and do your homework and get strength in numbers. And then once you meet with that particular member, if that's the person from your legislative district, that's great. Start there. And then the legislative staffer hopefully is trained enough that they can say, now your next step is going to be going to the committee where this bill is going to land. Let's say it's the nursing home bill that I was talking about. That would probably go to the Human Services Committee, the Policy Committee, and then to the Ways and Means Financial Committee, where it has to get funded. So they would probably direct you to go meet with the members of those committees, because you want to start thinking ahead of time, and you want to get support from the members of those committees, because the more support you get from those, the next member you meet was going to say, well, did you get support from the members of that committee? Because they want to know that they're not just jumping on a bill to help co-sponsor it and tell other members. I mean, it's kind of like a Me Too kind of thing, where they're not going to support it unless their buddy down the hall is supporting it, or a member of their caucus is supporting it. And it's kind of a political game, but you got to kind of be part of it. And so legislative staffers that know their chops will help you kind of walk through that political landmine. So I would say that's a really important thing. And like Michelle said, they like to see people from their hometown, but they're also, let's say Representative Wilson is on that healthcare committee, or on that human services committee. He's going to want to know if people are coming to him about bills that are on his committee too. So you've got to explain to him why he's willing to support or not support a bill that's coming to his committee, and what's in it for him, or why he should or shouldn't support that bill. So he's going to be taking meetings from people that are coming to him about bills that are coming to him, that are coming to his committee. So you want to try to explain to him why you should or shouldn't, he should or shouldn't support bills coming to his committee. So if you have a bill like that, you're going to be talking to him about that, and the strength in numbers thing I was talking about. You also can talk to him about bills that you oppose. One thing that really annoyed me about people who came and lobbied me as a staffer for my member, or wanted to come and meet with my member, was as conservative staffers, we would always get conservative citizens coming to us and yelling at us and wanting our members to stop gun control bills or abortion bills, or those kinds of things. I'm like, you guys are preaching to the choir. You're wasting our time. We're already agreeing with you. Go talk to the other side. That's where you need to spend your energy, over there. And there'd be folks who'd be really nasty. And like Michelle said, I mean, it's hard for me to hang up the phone when you're standing in front of me, but I can call security, Or I can say, you know what, I've got somebody on hold. Let me just let them know that I'll call them back and I'll be right with you. And what I'm really doing is, instead of picking up hold, I'm calling security. I'm pushing the right button and saying, you know, oh, I've got those documents. I'll be right down to pick them up in a minute. And that's my cue to call security and get rid of you. So there are ways to get rid of nasty people that staffers have. I'm not saying there were that many conservative visitors. There were a few liberal visitors that I did that to. I mean, it got to the point where they were right in my face, and one of them poked me a couple times, and that was it. I'm done with you, right? But I just think it's not a good use of your time to come and, you know, try to lobby conservatives on issues that they're already going to be opposed to or supportive of, because they've got other things going on. And you should be really trying to convince some of the Blue Dog Democrat members like Brian Clem and Betsy Johnson and Brad Witt, the guys that are on the fence, you know, this really isn't a good idea. And some of them are like, you know what, you're probably right. And they might actually vote our way, and they have in the past. So, I mean, again, I think it's worth your time to go spend it that way. That's just my own personal take on it. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, call ahead of time. I mean, if you just show up, chances are I might have run down to the floor to get something and you're going to miss me and you're going to end up with an empty office. So call ahead of time. Let me know that you guys are coming, and we're happy to meet with you if you let us know. You know, if at all possible, we'll try to get, you know, pull the member off the floor for 5 minutes, because they love to see people from their hometown. And don't be afraid if you live in an area where the person that represents you is not from your political stripe. I mean, they're willing to meet with their own constituents. So don't be afraid to say, look, I think you're wrong on this issue. I just want you to know this is my family's opinion on it. And Michelle's right about the spam emails. I didn't put them in a folder. I would just count them up and push the delete key. And we're under no obligation in public records laws to keep them. If they're from a constituent, we keep them. And I would tell my member, out of the 200, you know, emails we got today from XYZ issue, you know, 5 of them were from your district. And so we'll write those back tonight, and you can tell me what you want me to say on your behalf. And the rest went into the round file. But I think more effective ones are the ones that say, you know, I'm opposed to this issue or supportive, and this is the way it's going to impact my family, and make them short and direct. So I think those are the ones that are the most effective. And I can't imagine working in the Capitol right now with the way it is. It must just be a nightmare. I've heard stories from some friends of mine there about how the technology and trying to get through on the Zoom calls is just a nightmare. And I get all the newsletters from all the members right now, and all their, oh, we had such a great hearing and we got testimony from 100 people. And you know what? 99 of them were all in support of XYZ bill. And the, you know, the one person that tried to get through that was opposed to it, you know, the technology was breaking up, and, oh, I'm sorry, your phone line crapped out. And it was the one person who was opposed to it that I probably agreed with, and that was opposed to the bill. And it's just sad. It's just sad that that's what it's come to. And they're talking about what a great, you know, transparency, and they've got more people that are able to access it. No, they don't. On that same bill, they would have had 3 overflow rooms that are hearing rooms at the Capitol that would have been in the basement and down the hall, and they would have had 400 people signed up to testify, not 100 people on hold on the phone. And so they're just, it's disingenuous for them to say that there's more people accessing this system. They're not. And it's just really sad that our democracy's come to this in Salem. And I'm glad I'm not a part of it. It's just
Right.
sad. But so I'm happy to answer questions. My name Michelle is, and I'm just really grateful that she invited me today.
Thank you. It is an extraordinarily grueling job. And by full time, I mean that during the session, staff can expect to work all day and evenings and weekends and through holidays. There really isn't any time off for us up there. So yeah, sometimes through the night, you know, if things are getting down to the wire and we're getting amendments at a rapid fire pace, you know, we've got to work as long as the work is in front of us to dissect those amendments and find out what they mean, and be prepared for committee or session the next day. It's just an extraordinarily grueling place to work. And then in the off season, you know, we've got nonstop constituent service. People don't stop having problems just because the legislature isn't meeting. This past year, 2020, although I was working from home, it was nonstop email regarding unemployment issues, for instance. And that was particularly defeating because there wasn't a whole heck of a lot that I could do to affect that situation other than reach out to our legislative contacts at unemployment office and say, hey, can you give some attention to this person who has been waiting 5, 6, 12 weeks, months for their unemployment, or any kind of communication from the employment department that lets them know that their claim is being handled. It was just a depressing and defeating time to be working with the legislature and not having sufficient tools or training to really reach into those situations and help people out. I don't know, again, I don't know what it's like currently, but I would find it really depressing not to have that interaction with people, even people who were opposing my member or our bills or were in support of actions or policies or bills that we weren't. I enjoyed the interaction with people. It was, you know, part of the process. And I reveled in the fact that our building was wide open and that anybody could walk in there and walk right up to a member's office and engage us on any topic. That, to me, is how America should work and how our government should work. And right now, everything is being held in the dark and being virtual. And I just can't with that. And I'm really glad, actually, that I'm not a part of it anymore.
Yeah.
One other thing that's going to be happening with our legislative staffers, when I came on board, I was delighted to learn that this was probably the last bastion of voluntary association and transactions within state government. That is, you came to an agreement with your member about your compensation. And if it was agreeable to both of you within budget for the office, you know, you were hired. Sometimes a staffer is also part of a campaign staff. And so maybe some portion of their salary is made up from the campaign or PAC that they work for. And so those things combined made for a reasonably good salary. But there is a movement afoot to unionize legislative staff and employees, which is probably going to change a lot about the way people are compensated, about who members can hire, and maybe the staff will have its own walkouts one of these days. I'm really not sure how that's going to work or how it's going to look, but the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers is organizing legislative employees, and they're having serious talks about unionization. So that's something that's going to be different going forward.
Michelle,
Yes.
we've got a question from Donna. What
Yes.
is your view on the impact of personal stories versus researching scientific facts?
I appreciate both. What I have a difficult time with is when someone will send me an entire article that's dense with scientific jargon or facts or analysis, and they don't provide me a synopsis. They expect that I'm going to read this entire 12 to 15 page article, and it became a little bit difficult. Obviously, a lot of that might have been entirely outside of my wheelhouse, but it would have been nice to have just a summary. You know, send me the executive summary and I can follow up if I need some more of those facts and scientific things. But certainly we would like to be fact-based as we're moving forward, and we don't want to have make any specious arguments. I don't want my member looking like a fool, when he's giving a speech on something. But I think both of those, personal stories and facts, are impactful and necessary to make a cogent argument. So I don't necessarily favor one over the other, but if you're going to get all scientific on me, please don't send me pages and pages and pages of data. Give me a summary and point me to the most relevant parts of it.
Yeah, I had two quick stories, both people in district for my last member. And one was a gal who wanted to have dental therapists be able to be licensed in Oregon. And they're just one step below a dentist and one up from a dental hygienist. And they can do almost everything a dentist can do, except for like surgery on like deep root canals and things like that. But they could do cavities and like fluoride treatments and things like that. And in a couple other states, they're licensed, and they're especially critical for like tribal clinics and kids' healthcare, student health clinics and things like that. And she brought me like this whole notebook about this thick, and about how you can get trained at the University of Michigan and things like that. And I was like, you know what? I don't have time to read this. I don't think the committee that you want to testify in front of is going to have time for that. I think you need a one-pager. And she ended up with like a 3-pager. And I'm like, and it was so complicated of an issue. And I said, she was, well, you know, there was a study in Oregon out on a tribe, and they just did a pilot program and it worked out great. And the number of cavities went down in the tribal kids. And I said, that's a fact that they can hang on to. It's a short research-based fact that works, right? So put that in your 1-pager. And it's also a personal story because you know someone who was involved in the study. So that worked in that one case. And it took her like 3 sessions. And I think the bill's still pending this session, in fact, to go do a pilot with real clinics out in Oregon that's not in a tribe. But another bill that had both was a gal from our district who wanted to change the dynamic of foster parents being able to adopt their foster kids, because right now the foster kids' parents who may be strung out on drugs or whatever have more of a right to adopt their kids than the foster parents who may have been caring for them for like 10 years. And so she wanted to make it so they both have equal footing when it comes time for adoption. And the adoption court could then look at both sets of parents and say, okay, well, who's got, you know, do they have job? Do they have income? Do they have how long have they been sober? All this kind of thing. And so I told this foster mom to bring a Kleenex box. And she said, what for? And I said, I want you crying in front of the committee. You're crying in front of me. I want you crying in front of the committee. And she did. And she got up and cried in front of the committee. And she brought, I said, I want you to bring an easel with a big picture of that foster daughter and put it up in front of the committee. So I brought the easel and she brought the picture of the foster daughter, and they passed that bill out of committee. And we used that easel, we used that picture, and we used that, you know, in front of the committee, and it passed on the floor and it passed in the Senate and it became law. But she also had statistics on how many foster kids don't get adopted by foster moms because of that law, and how many of those kids end up back out on the street with their drugged out, you know, parents who are not suitable. And so she used some fact-based and also her personal story.
That's really good. Loretta has a question.
Please.
Hey, Loretta, I see you've got your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yes, yes, I do. Just one second. Let me get it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I actually have a sort of a comment. I've been involved in politics, not in as much in this as I have been just since the presidential election. It's motivated me more than ever before. I lived up in Gresham. Matter of fact, I'm a dental hygienist. I know exactly what you're talking about with that other dental hygienist. And good for her that I have my expanded practice license. So I actually go and I serve elderly people and a lot of people that can't get care. But anyway, everything that you've said to me, just getting to the point, has made me feel very hopeless. I already have been really struggling. I mean, I've been putting so much effort out. Like I said, I used to go down in Portland with a friend of mine. We would go down to Portland and not protest, but put in what we thought was important, because we were such a minority up there, being Republicans and being conservative, and radical liberals for 39 years. So I know, and I'm a dental hygienist. I worked with all of, many of my patients were, and I treated them with the best care I ever could give. But what you're making me want to do is go support Move Oregon's Border more. I've already been behind that. I've already gone and done everything. I'm putting my money and my efforts towards that as well. But you're making me want to just walk away. Oregon is a beautiful place. Matter of fact, if I put it on my video right now, I'm out in my vineyard. We have Malbec grapes, and I'm trimming the grapes right now. It's gorgeous here in Roseburg, but I don't know. I mean, maybe I need to move to Arkansas or maybe Idaho. I don't know. Idaho's being taken over too. So is there anything you can give me some hope about? Because I'm feeling pretty hopeless right now.
One of the probably the most heartening moments while I was working at legislature were the Timber Unity rallies. We were often inundated by labor unions and student unions and the Moms Demand Gun Action and folks like that. They were organized, they were loud, they came in huge numbers, and just swamped the building with their speech. And when working people got together to sacrifice their workday, to sacrifice the cost of fuel, to bring their trucks and circle the building for hours on end, blaring their horns and making their voices heard, making making rural Oregon and working Oregon visible to the folks in the Capitol. That was an extraordinarily heartening time for me. And I did feel hope that with enough people who were willing to make those sacrifices of personal time and a work day, showing up at the building and being loud, that maybe we could demonstrate that Portland doesn't rule everything. And perhaps we could turn the tide, and as Richard said, rework the fabric of our political system. In a number of ways, I feel
just
hopeless too.
being
Being
at the thank you, being at the grassroots, down at the Douglas County headquarters, there are some, it almost makes me cry. There are some fabulous people that are there. And Dallas Hurd came and talked to us 2 weeks ago, and he's dynamic. He's young, and thank God for young people. But anyway, he's got guts. I give him that. But there are people fired up, and then there are people that I was up in Portland for 39 years. So coming back home, this is where I was raised. I realized that there are so many people down here that they don't even care what the government does, because they believe that if they come near their places, they're just they'll take care of it themselves. They don't trust the government. They don't believe in getting involved. And I actually believe that they don't think that they're going to have control over them. And a lot of it is because they've lived down here for so long and they haven't seen it. Douglas County is a very conservative county, and there's a lot of really wonderful people that go to church, and they're Christian based, and so they've been in their own little community. And I feel like I'm coming in as a sort of Paul Revere in a way, going, you guys don't realize this is bad, this is really bad. And they're like, oh no, our life is still good here. Well, it's not. And so that's why I've been plus I feel safer down here. I didn't feel safe up in Portland anymore. I was afraid. I was afraid of the bad people that were around, and the riots and everything are just the truth. And I don't think people realize how bad they are. I still teach actually up there. I teach at Mount Hood Community College in the dental hygiene program, and I hate driving through there. I hate driving up because it's stressful. So anyway, I've taken up enough time, but I wanted to tell you, sort of made me feel hopeless.
I agree. I agree. There's a lot that's troubling that's going on out there. Right around the same time that Timber Unity was active, we had another bill, which was essentially mandatory vaccinations, which, eliminating the religious and philosophical out, as it were, to getting your children vaccinated on a specific schedule. And that activated a bunch of moms, and in particular, an ethnic group in the Woodburn, Salem, Portland area, the Slavic vote. Now, these folks came from places in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union, where, they had definite reasons to mistrust government. For decades and decades, they had been persecuted and found that government was not their friend at every turn. So when they came to make a new life for themselves, they were just simply opposed to having anything to do with governance or the state. And that was culturally ingrained in them until they realized that their rights, their religious liberties, were being impacted by this potential legislation. And they activated. They showed up in numbers. They were extraordinarily good testifiers and advocates for their point of view. And that also gives me a great deal of hope too, is that there are folks out there who, once they realize that government isn't going to let them alone and politics will affect them, they will mobilize and be part of the solution. So I hope that, here in Josephine County, it's not too dissimilar from Douglas County. We have a lot of folks who just got their 5 to 20 acres and a nice big fence, and they believe that they can hold out against everything, but that's not going to be the case forever. So we just need to keep, informing and encouraging and bringing people on board, getting them involved and voting the right way.
Okay, very good. We've got time for a couple more questions, but I wanted you and maybe Dawn to comment on what happens when legislative assistants are brought into meetings with legislators behind closed doors, and you talk about bills. I've often pointed out that there are a lot more bills than legislators are actually able to read, and that they rely on legislative assistants on how to vote on a lot of bills when they come up for a third reading in the House. And the role that legislators sometimes have in persuading a legislator to vote one way or the other when they get on the floor, and how activists might be able to get legislative assistants to bring bills before legislators in those private meetings.
That's an interesting question. As in LA, we rely primarily on the Nonpartisan Legislative Policy Office that kicks out analysis for every single bill. That is their job, strictly their job. And they provide the summaries that include the budgetary impacts and the revenue impacts, and just kind of a tight summary of what that bill is going to accomplish. And it's not weighted one way or another, really. So we rely heavily on that work. In addition to which, the caucus offices each have their own cadre of policy analysts who are tasked with specific committees. And so they've got a really good grasp of what's going on. So if we don't have the time to dig into a particular bill, we can reach out to either of those policy offices or our caucus offices and usually get help with that. In addition to which, the caucuses keep their members informed of what's coming down the pike, and they typically encourage them to vote one way or another on specific pieces of information, legislation. So I know that that's what I'm doing when I don't have time to do the digging myself. And just, you know, if it's important to you, communicate often and briefly with your member and make sure they know where you're coming from and what's important to you or what's important to stop.
So what Michelle was mentioning, what we call LPRO, Legislative Policy and Research Office, used to be just called committee services, the committee staff, that all the bills that are assigned to committee, the staff then looks through all those bills and writes a little summary. And if you're familiar at all with the legislative website, there's a little thing called OLIS. It's the Oregon Legislative Information Service, and it's where all the bills are housed on the website. And I wish there was a tutorial, like a little YouTube video that said, when you get to OLIS, on this tab, you'll find this. And on this tab, you'll find this. And there's a tab in there that says analysis. And it actually takes you to where you'll find what we call the staff measure summary. And it's just what it is. The staff wrote a summary of the measure. And that is a little one-pager that tells you what the bill is about. You only get those summaries if the bill gets to the point where it's going to have a hearing. If the bill never gets a hearing, nobody's going to write a summary about it because it's just not worth it. You got 4,000 bills, they're not going to spend that staff time on it. I think the last time I heard an estimate to move a bill from one side of the building to another is $4,000. I think just to file the bill is like $1,000. So it's expensive to do all that work. But anyway, when you find that SMS, that's where you'll find just a nonpartisan kind of, this is what the background is, the history on this issue, and this is what this bill would do to change it. And that summary will change as it goes through the process. Like there might be an amendment, or it might move from the House over to the Senate, that kind of thing. So you'll see different SMSs in there. So my process was always, whatever member I was working for, we would kind of, feel each other out and go, okay, so I know you're like this on this issue and you're this on this issue. So where do you stand on this and this? So if there was a bill coming on the floor and they said, oh God, there's 70 bills on the floor today. What do you know about this one? And I go, you're not gonna like this one because I know you hate X. Okay, so I'm a no on that. But what about this one? Somebody told me it has such and such in it. I go, yeah, so I could see where you might be a yes on this because I know the way they are on that issue. And there's been times where we had no time to talk at all. And so if I'm sitting on the floor and they're like, I haven't had a chance to look at the list today, just go down and put yes or no next to all of them. And so when I get there, I'll just trust your gut. Or there's been times where I'm sitting over on the side aisle, like 50 yards away from them, and I look up at what the bill number is, and they're looking at me and they're just lost, and they're like this, and I'm like this, and they're like, so they've trusted me that much.
Right.
Or they'll trust other caucus members on the floor because they haven't had time to read up. But I'd say that happens maybe 50% of the time. The rest of the time, they've taken the time to, look at it, study it on their own, or they've looked at it the night before, or they've talked to someone else in the caucus, or, it's gone through their committee or something like that. Most of my members have been senior members, not lost freshmen, who are pretty good about, and we usually had an agreement that, okay, I'm going to be in charge of all your committee bills and all of this and all your constituent bills, and you're responsible for what's going on the floor because you're going to caucus meetings and I can't go to caucus with you because only caucus members can go to caucus. And in caucus, they usually talk about what's coming up on the floor and how they feel about it. So they have a pretty good thing for that. I'll tell you one quick story. I went over to the Senate floor one day because I mostly worked in the House, and I was waiting for one of my members' bills to come up or something. And Larry George, he's such a character, was a senator, and there was this horrible gun bill that was coming up. And I started seeing them voting yes on it. And I look over at him and I'm sitting on the side aisle and he's looking at me and I'm like, and he's like, he comes over and he goes, what? And I said, this is a horrible gun bill. And he's like, you mean we should vote no on this? And I said, yeah, what are you guys doing? And he's like, okay, hang on a second. So he runs over to Ferrioli, who's the Senate caucus leader, and he goes, Don Phillips said we should be voting no on this. And he goes, well, do you trust her? And he goes, yeah, she's never steered me wrong. So all of a sudden they all start changing their vote to no. And like almost all 15 of them had already voted. And so they all start standing up, and G-Rod's voting no, and Thatcher's voting no, and they're all like start voting no and changing their votes and stuff. And so I had to leave and go do something. So they get into caucus, they're like, George, what are you doing? And he goes, Don has never steered me wrong. And then somebody else starts, like Knope looks at the bill and he goes, why did we vote yes on this piece of crap in the first place? This is a horrible bill. And so later, all of a sudden I'm standing in my office back over in the house, and here comes George, and he goes, thank you so much. He goes, God, you saved our bacon. And he says, from now on, he goes, I will totally trust you. You can come over to the floor anytime and save our bacon. So, so that's our big story now is, you know, I can tell Larry how to vote anytime I want to. So.
Well, the bottom line there is your legislative aides have a lot of power, and you never know when they're going to be able to apply that power. And, you know, it's not to suggest that it's applied with any malice, but they're trying to help their members do the right thing when they're overrun by so many bills and so much information. But I tell people all the time, don't underestimate the value of building a relationship with a legislative assistant in addition to the legislator themselves.
Agreed.
We're about out of time here. I think we have time for maybe one more question, unless you want to wrap up, Michelle?
I'm good to go. Give me a question or let me out of here.
I want to thank Michelle for doing this. I think she was caught by surprise when I asked her, but I thought, you know, people really need to know what legislative aides do and what their lives are like. And I couldn't think of anyone better than Michelle.
Except maybe Don.
Yeah, Don is very good too. That's true. And so I want to thank you very much, both Don and of course, Michelle for doing this today. Does anyone else have any final questions?
This is Charlie. Just to say, Don and Michelle, thank you so much for doing this. It was eye-opening, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, very well. We may do this again sometime. I think there's a lot of value here. Anyway, I want to thank all of you for participating today. And as always, next Saturday, we'll have another training at 1 o'clock. Same bat time, same bat station. And in the meantime, God bless and take care of yourselves.
Thank you very much.
Bye.